It's bloody October, innit? Bloody October! Who's excited, lads? Wait, did you actually think that I was British? Got your ass, didn't I? I told you in my last video I was gonna practice being a bloke. Hello, and happy sexiest month of the year. I know what you're thinking, so before I go anywhere with this video, I know. I got this at Spirit Halloween for like $12, and it's one of the most gorgeous things I've ever purchased. Bloody gorgeous, innit? Anyway, it's time to talk about everything that I watched in September, and what a month that we had. Barbarian, Pearl, Smile, Who Invited Them, the Goodnight Mommy remake, Don't Worry Darling, some winners and some losers, to put it lightly. I'll kick this video off with all of the TV shows that I watched, and this month that includes some new releases like Little Demon and The Patient. Then I'll go over all the non-horror movies that I watched, and this month that only includes 2 new releases, Do Revenge and See How They Run. Then I'll talk about all my horror rewatches of the month, and this month that'll include the theatrical re-release of Jaws. After that will be all my new watches of old horror movies, all the movies I somehow haven't seen yet. This month that'll include I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, finally saw The Empty Man from 2020, and Slumber Party Massacre 2. And then what you're probably all waiting for, all of the new horror movie releases of the month. So of course that'll include Barbarian, Pearl, Smile, and many more. There will be timestamps linked down below if you're only interested in certain categories of this video too, by the way. It's been a pretty great month for horror, honestly. I'm really excited to dive in, and so luckily the first show we have to talk about is Little Demon, which is a dark comedy. This show follows a middle school aged girl who learns she's the Antichrist and has to deal with her feuding parents, Satan and a Wiccan witch. Danny DeVito voices Satan. I think his real life daughter plays his daughter in the show, and then Aubrey Plaza plays her mother, the Wiccan witch. Do you need any more convincing to watch this show? It's a very similar high concept type of vibe to Rick and Morty, where there's different dimensions, but instead of sci-fi, it's more magic. The humor was a little bit iffy in the first episode, but I feel like that often happens with TV shows where like the first episode's a little rough because you gotta get to know the characters, and by the second episode I was into it. My favorite relationship of the show is between the witch Laura and her neighbor Darlene, because Laura is always doing some insane shit, like getting buck naked in a circle of fire so that she can astral project her body into hell, and she's like, Darlene, I need you to watch my body for me, and Darlene's like, yeah, sure thing, Laura. The two of them get into various hijinks together, which is probably my favorite part of the show. It's also very gory for the gorehounds out there, and I think it's gonna walk us through a good arc of Satan becoming a good dad. So far I think I've seen the first 4 episodes, and I'm really excited to watch the rest. Next up will be Sprung, a new Amazon Freevee show, whatever that is. Sprung is a comedy show that follows convicts released from prison in the beginning of the pandemic as they try to pull off the ultimate heist. They released the finale on September 16th, and the last time that I talked about it, I'd only seen the first 2 episodes at the premiere. I really enjoyed the show. It was funny and wholesome with good characters, but with the finale, I do have a gripe. It also doesn't really sound like a gripe, but they wrapped the show up perfectly. Like, there's not really any type of setup possible for a season 2. I kind of feel like they did that with the expectation that they would not get greenlit for a second season, which is really weird, but there's like nowhere for the story to go now. Especially because they do a time jump to the present, where we're much more well informed about the ins and outs of, you know, living through a pandemic. So if they came back for a season 2, they would have no real ability to go back to kind of the best part of the show, which is the fact that it was a bunch of idiots trying to navigate a pandemic. So whatever season 2 would be, they wouldn't be able to put these characters in that same situation, so I just don't feel like it would be as good. But I still love the creator, I love the actors, they're the same team behind one of my favorite shows of all time, which is Raising Hope. So maybe another limited series, guys? Please? But moving on, up next we have something pretty exciting, which is 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. This is a new docuseries on Shudder, and it's exactly what the title entails, with tons of celebrity interviews and great scene breakdowns. They got names in this documentary. I'm like, good for you, Shudder. Shudder is stepping its pussy up as the superior horror streaming service, that's for sure. Oh, what, I can't say pussy on YouTube? Why am I allowed to say dick then? Sorry, stupid bit. My friends and I were blowing up our little group chat while we watched the first episode kind of all at the same time, because we're like, oh my god, we all love horror, we love it so much. It's an excellent compilation of amazing horror moments. I recommend this show to anybody that loves horror. There's not much else to say though, it's all in the name, so go nuts. The Patient is up next, a new Hulu FX original. This follows a therapist who is kidnapped by one of his patients to act as his private specialist. I've now seen the first 4 episodes of this show, and it's only okay. I do find it really interesting. I think the premise they've set up is really cool, and I'm very interested in psychology, but it does drag, and I think that this easily could have been a movie. The first episode was super interesting. I have a feeling the last episode will be super interesting, but all of the middle episodes kind of have me checking how much time is left in the episode, especially because they're all about 20 to 30 minutes long, and I think there's 2 or 3 ad breaks per episode. I'm not about to shell out for Hulu Plus either. What, you think I'm made of money? So I hope it gets better and has a satisfying finale, but I do need them to shake things up a bit. Abbott Elementary would be up next because it was finally released to Hulu, and I think HBO Max as well. This comedy follows a group of elementary school teachers in one of the most underfunded districts in Philadelphia. This show is as good as everyone says. It takes a few episodes to get into it because you kind of need to get to know the characters to find them funny. It's like any sitcom where it's kind of only funny because you know the characters' personalities, but I fell in love with it. I'm so excited that the second season is coming out right now. It's very much a The Office and Parks and Rec ripoff. There's even a gym character that looks into the camera whenever anything quirky is going on. There's a golden retriever, get shit done type of energy, very much the Leslie Knope of the show. There's a completely airhead boss like Michael Scott. Her name is Ava, but I don't mind any of these kind of copycat characters because I love both of those shows. I highly recommend. There is a reason why Quinta Brunson won the Emmy. Also, fuck you, Jimmy Kimmel. Fuck you. Moving on though to the non-horror movies of the month. Up first we have See How They Run, a new whodunit in theaters. In 1950s London, a movie adaptation of a whodunit play is in the works until one of the crew members is killed. A weary inspector and a rookie cop are then put on the case. I was kind of excited for this movie because I love whodunits, like I adore them, and the cast is really stacked. However, this movie stunk. It stank, was rank, not dank. Bars. I just threw that off the top of the old dome. I'm confused why the reviews of this movie are so good. In my theater, the audience didn't laugh at any of the jokes, and I think you can put jokes in quotations when they're not funny. I think most of these actors are pretty funny though. Sam Rockwell, Saoirse Ronan especially, they just had really bad dialogue. I felt like it was written for old ladies. I feel like old ladies would have a good time with this one. Also, the killer reveal is so blah, it's so bland. And it's usually the best part of a whodunit. It was kind of the worst part of this one. What I did like is that it was really self-aware. It was trying to be a satire, keyword trying, but I wish that it was also aware that it was a bad movie. I always bring up Scream during these conversations because I feel like Bodies, Bodies, Bodies was kind of a failed satire too. Scream is one of the only truly great satires because it's calling out all of these slasher tropes and then completely subverting expectation. This movie hardly ever subverts expectation, and you never really grow fond of these characters because they're all quite boring. So there are no stakes because you don't really care who lives or dies. This movie is basically just calling out whodunit tropes as it's literally doing them in front of your very eyes. It's not funny. I feel like more often than not these days, calling something a satire is just an excuse for lazy writing. Oh, it's a satire. It's actually not supposed to be good. Whatever, the other non-horror movie that I watched this month was actually really good, and that would be Do Revenge on Netflix. Starring Camila Mendes and Maya Hawke, this follows 2 girls scorned by their peers as they carry out an elaborate revenge plan. Teen comedies are back, bitch. Oh my god. This is one of the only good things that Netflix has done this year. Fucking bravo. I feel like Riverdale has been holding Camila Mendes back a little bit. I feel like she could be this generation's Lindsay Lohan. Of course, Maya Hawke is amazing and gay, as she always is for Netflix productions. This movie subverted a lot of my expectations because by all accounts it probably should have been just another kind of like cheap Mean Girls Netflix knockoff. I should have known better though because this was written and directed by women who are in their 30s, so I really should have put more faith into it. But I didn't know that going in, to be fair. It's very self-aware and it calls out 90s teen tropes in the best way. There's even a part where they walk around the high school and they point out all of the school's cliques, but they totally modernize it. Like one of the cliques is a group of witches. There's a part where everyone is on shrooms. It's phenomenal. It's so accurate. I mean, hypothetically, if I knew what an accurate shroom trip looked like. It stars the boy Austin Abrams from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and honestly, I love that for him. It's for the girls and the gays, and it's about the power of female friendship and what it means to hold on to resentments. I think there was kind of a good message in this movie. Sarah Michelle Gellar also has a small role, and of course, she's amazing. I think it's just the dream movie for anyone who feels super nostalgic about 90s teen comedies like Clueless or something, and then it's also going to be really good and relatable for the Gen Z crowd that wants to watch it too. It is the revival love the 90s. We've been stuck in the 80s for way too long, like we are past due to start romanticizing the 90s again. Let's get on to some horror movies though, shall we? Everything that I rewatched in September, let's start with Jaws. As a lot of you guys know, Jaws came back to theaters early last month. There's not much to say, but like fucking wowza, you know? I'm pretty sure that it is the first true horror movie I ever saw as a child, so to see it in theaters was pretty surreal. I'm loving this trend too, classic horror hitting the big screen again, because I also saw The Thing in theaters this past summer. So more of that, please. I also watched Friday the 13th Part 2, but I'm gonna save my thoughts on that one because pretty soon here I am gonna be doing a ranking of the franchise on a live, but probably sometime in November. And speaking of rankings, the next thing I rewatched were all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So we did do a live ranking of that just a couple of weeks ago, and this time around, I fell so much more in love with that franchise. I think that it does break my top 10 now. I think we'll have to rank them again in another 2 years because it's really interesting to see how these franchises, or just like movies in general, how they hit you at different points in your life. But up next was Your Next. I enjoyed this movie, but I did like it a lot more the first time around when I didn't know what was gonna happen. So I didn't enjoy it that much, but to be very fair to the movie, I did watch it on a day where I was depressed. So I can't deny that that was a factor because I was in the fucking pits. I thought that a fun, over-the-top horror movie would make me feel better, but alas. The thing that I enjoyed about it most was actually Barbara Crampton's performance because I feel like she was the only one who really knew what movie she was in. She's hilarious, and I wish that this movie had a little bit more comedy because it's such an over-the-top concept, but it's mostly played pretty straight, and I guess that's why we have Ready or Not. So Your Next is a 3 out of 5 star movie for me. It's not one of my favorites and probably not one that I'll rewatch too much, but I do like that it's an easy watch with a really badass final girl. Next up would be Barbarian because I did watch this in theaters twice, so it makes the rewatch list. I also had some great Barbarian content this month. The director of the movie, Zach Krager, actually shared my review on Twitter. I know, everybody relax. But it's true, he said I deserved an award for it. So I'm still waiting on that. But because he shared my review, one thing led to another, and I got in contact with the star Matthew Patrick Davis, and he came on for a live Q&A and interview. It's been a good month, I know, fucking settle down everybody, jeez. So I won't be talking about Barbarian in this video, you'll just have to go check out that other content. Up next is a classic. I rewatched The Babysitter for probably like the 4th time. I watched it the first night that I got into the UK with my friends. We're gonna watch the sequel in a couple days. I adore this movie because it's just so stupid, and it's really where Samara Weaving started to show her chops. In a world where she could probably do any genre, thank God she became the queen of dark comedies. I've talked your guys' ear off about The Babysitter in the past though, and the only other movies that I rewatched this month I think were the first 4 Child's Play movies. We have since finished our rewatch of the franchise this month, and I know I'm late with this video, I know I'm slacking, but I'm on vacation. Child's Play I think will forever remain as one of my favorite horror franchises of all time, please. No need to chat about it, and depending on when this video comes out, there might already be a live of me ranking the entire franchise on this channel. I did that in honor of Chucky Season 2 coming out, and speaking of, we did do a predictions live stream about Chucky Season 2 as well. Anyway, it's time to get on to new watches of old horror movies. I finished watching every single movie directed by Wes Craven. That was a wild ride, and that was for my deep dive of his career and ranking all the films he directed. Surprisingly, I don't really know what I expected, but I think I'm more of a Craven girl than a Carpenter girl after exploring both of their filmographies. But yeah, check out that video on him, and that one was really well researched. That one took me fucking forever. Next would be Slumber Party Massacre 2. I am so glad I finally watched this movie. I wrote on Letterboxd that it's like if the people who made Grease were on crack. Nothing makes sense, but again, that's what makes sense about it. It's this fine-ass killer with the most epic weapon in slasher history. Can we be real for a second? Why didn't they make 4,000 movies with this killer? Feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. He dances around, being all sexy, the music is amazing, it's so much fun. It's kind of a boring build-up where for the first like 45 minutes we're doing the, ooh, is she crazy? Is this all in her head? It's annoying because we know it's happening. It's not a very compelling mystery. And then in the final act, it's like, fuck yeah, dude. Give me this. Give me this all day long. No thoughts. Head empty. Girls just want to have fun. The next movie is also pretty fun. Disturbing Behavior from 1999. The best year ever. Also, what the hell is this poster? Am I right? This kind of looks like shit. Anyway, Steve is the newest student at this high school where the jocks are essentially a blue ribbon cult who set the example for well-behaved students. I guess that I watched the theatrical version that they had on HBO Max, but apparently there is a director's cut of some sort that's way better out there. I thought it was fine. There's definitely some 90s charm. A lot of the tropes that Do Revenge played homage to are very much present in this movie. James Marsden plays this role pretty straight, which I'm not a super big fan of because I feel like he's at his best when he's playing a himbo, but he was thirsting after the goth goth girl in this movie, so to that I say bravo. It didn't do as much for me as I thought it would because I love a 90s flick that's so bad that it's good, so, you know, if you're in the mood for that, then I guess I still recommend it. The next movie that I watched was Bug, and that was not fucking fun. This basically follows a woman who begins a relationship with a man who becomes paranoid about a bug infestation in her apartment. Seriously, somebody please help me. I don't know why I watched this movie. I think I had finished Disturbing Behavior, and then this movie popped up right afterwards on HBO Max, and I was like, sure, why don't I go ahead and watch it? What's the worst that could happen, right? Guys, I don't know. I don't know about this one. It was so much, but I couldn't look away. It was like a car crash effect. Same director from that little movie The Exorcist, by the way. What I will say is that it effectively disturbed me. It went in very intriguing directions that I did not see coming. The acting performances were amazing as well, but this movie was very hard to watch. Lots of really heavy themes and disturbing imagery, and then after going through all of that, I wasn't very satisfied by the end. There was not a satisfying conclusion, so I basically felt the way that I did at the end of the movie as I did during the whole weird build-up. And I don't like that because then it kind of feels like there wasn't any sort of point to it at all. There was no catharsis. I don't really recommend the movie, but it's not exactly bad. If you're in the mood for some seriously weird shit, it's like 2 a.m. and you're just like, I need to feed my brain something truly just fucking odd, then I would recommend this movie. The next movie we have to talk about is the complete opposite, Practical Magic with Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock. This follows a family of witches as they get into all sorts of hijinks like falling in love and dealing with witch hunts and just having a good time. I gave this film a perfect rating, 5 fucking stars, bitch. I loved this movie so much to the point where I actually updated my favorite 4 films on Letterboxd. That's right. Dark Shadows got bumped, had to do it. This is one of the most feel-good, female empowerment, the power of female friendship type movies I've ever seen. It's so cozy, autumn vibes too. Please watch this if you never have, my fellow ladies, my fellow witches. Speaking of, comment down below what ritual are you doing this fine full moon? It's almost here, it's on the 9th, so if you haven't figured that out, then, you know, get to it. As for Practical Magic though, this was just everything I love in a movie and more. I don't have any kind of like thought-provoking insights to it, it's just fun. So let's move on to The Empty Man, kind of a sleeper hit from 2020. When a girl mysteriously disappears, a former police officer sets out to investigate the matter and stumbles onto a bigger problem than he anticipated. I watched this because it was leaving HBO Max on the 1st of October, and people here and there had kind of been raving about it, but it never gained that much traction, and after watching it, I can understand why. It's just not gonna be for everyone. It definitely really wasn't for me. It meanders so much. I had a hard time keeping my attention on it because so often I would ask, hey, what's going on? By the time that there was actually a decent payoff, I was so beyond my loss of interest, I was elsewhere. I ended up only giving it 2.5 stars. I feel like it's a flop. If you don't mind being a little bit bored while you watch a movie, then maybe go for it. Because I do know that this movie will be worth it for some people. I just made sure to watch it because I'm pretty sure now it's not going to be available anywhere in the US, so sorry, maybe I shouldn't recommend it. So anyway, next up would be I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. This was also leaving HBO Max, so just made sure to give it a watch. It wasn't very good, but I still had a pretty good time with it. My main frustration is that it had the opportunity to be really clever, but then the killer reveal was so obvious. I think I called it like when there was still an hour of the movie left. So that was really disappointing and I think kind of hindered what would have otherwise been a pretty enjoyable watch. I've always really loved the original, but now I'm wondering if Sarah Michelle Gellar played a bigger role in my enjoyment than I initially thought. But anyway, the sequel is still pretty fun. I still recommend it. You know what's even more fun though? New releases. Yup. Time to talk new releases, and first up would be Who Invited Them, a new Shudder original. Who Invited Them follows a couple as they try to figure out who their uninvited party guests are, and as the night grows later, things continue to get stranger. I guess I'm sort of in the minority of really loving this movie. If you've seen The Invitation or Coherence, those are also both really low budget, one location horror dinner party movies. This movie feels exactly like those do, and I love all of them. I know it's an extremely specific niche, but now I think it's one of my favorites. Indie dinner party horror, you know, I could make one of those on my own, I think. A lot of people cited this movie as being really predictable, but I didn't find it to be predictable. Maybe I'm just a dunce. It's not very heavy on the horror. It's mainly a drama until things get cranked up really in the 3rd act. So you have to be patient if that's what you're looking for, but if you do enjoy a good slow burn, a really interesting, mysterious build-up, then I would recommend this one. And there's also a lot of comedy, which is something that I do appreciate. I think that it actually works. There are a few elements that definitely don't really make sense, but I can't get into that without spoiling the movie, so I'm not going to talk about it. I was teetering between giving it 3.5 and 4 stars out of 5 because it's not a perfect film by any means, but ultimately this movie had me hooked, and so I did chip it the extra half star. I gave it 4 stars because it kept me really entertained. If you're not not into drama and slow burns, then probably don't give this a go. But in my opinion, it's entertaining throughout, and I think that the payoff is well worth it. Plus, I think the acting is great. In the beginning, you might not think so, but then it does get pretty real. It almost has a Get Out type feel where you know that something is wrong, but it could be for literally any reason. Like, you do not know what's going on. It definitely keeps you guessing, and I think I'll have a lot of fun on a rewatch too, picking up all the little clues that they dropped. I highly recommend it, honestly. I think it's kind of rare when Shudder drops an absolute gem of an original movie like this. I think the last truly good one was The Boy Behind the Door, but every once in a while Shudder really does the damn thing, so watch this one. The Innocents was also just added to Shudder, and this has been on my watch list forever. The Innocents follows a group of Norwegian children as they discover their superpowers, but the question now is whether or not they'll use them for good. I didn't like this one, and I'm pretty bummed because I'd wanted to see it for so long. There are a lot of things that the movie does well, for sure. At the top of the list would be the child actors. It's also very disturbing. There's a lot that I had to turn away from, actually, but here's why. They went for some pretty low-hanging fruit in terms of trying to disturb. And I'm gonna talk about one of them, and it's a light spoiler, but for my sensitive people, I just know that this is gonna be too much. It happens really early on, and maybe it's in the trailer, I don't know, but one of the children ends up killing a cat. And it's not super dragged out, but it also doesn't happen quickly, and it is very hard to watch. That's usually where I would turn a movie off because you just don't do that. However, this is quite the critical darling, and so many people have been raving about it, so I just cowboyed up and I kept watching. But this movie is also about 2 hours long, and I was fried. I think I had taken an edible that night, so it felt like eons of my life. It's a super slow burn that I just didn't feel like was necessary. It's not a complicated story at all, so it felt like there was also a lot of needless repetition. So that's why I rated it too low. I think that there was just so much that could have been trimmed, and it had me really bored. It's hard to bore me when I'm high too. I will literally get high and sit in front of my movie shelf and just stare at my collection of movies for like a half hour sometimes. It's like in The Sims when you get them a new decoration and they just stand in front of it and they're like, decorated. So anyway, with The Innocents, I don't know. I guess I still recommend it because so many people are loving it, so maybe you'll be one of those people. And if you're super desensitized to horror, there is some very low-hanging fruit in this movie that will make your skin crawl, so maybe it'll be worth it. Up next would be Pussy Cake. Yes, you heard me correctly, and there's nothing wrong with your eyes. This movie is called Pussy Cake. And I'm not censoring myself because it's a movie title. Suck my ass, YouTube. This follows a punk rock band of women as they encounter a highly unique zombie breakout. I wish that this was as sick as it sounds. For some people, honestly, I think it will be, because if you're a total gore hound, this movie has got it. And for the people who love vomit, oh yeah, this is one of your better options. Aside from that, this movie has nothing going for it. When a movie has a really low budget and chooses to go all out in one lane with this movie, the gore, it's just not going to be for everybody. However, it will feed a very specific niche. So not much to say there. I think that there are some things about it that are pretty unique, actually. It took some twists that I didn't expect, but it was kind of painful for me to get through. There's just not really any substance to it. And I hate vomit too. I am the type that if you're throwing up in front of me, I'll start gagging too. I'm very weak when it comes to that, so obviously this one was not going to be for me. But anyway, the next one is a real crowd pleaser. That would be Barbarian. But again, you have to check out the other content that I put out about this movie. It's well worth your time, I promise. What might not be worth your time, though, is the Good Night Mommy remake that was just released to Prime. If you haven't seen the original, this follows twin boys who become suspicious of their mother when they go to stay with her as she recovers from a facial surgery. Guys, there's really nothing to say. This movie's pointless. I can't even objectively say if this is a good or bad movie. I'm pretty sure it's bad, but it's just so goddamn similar to the original. They barely change anything, and the things that they did change a little bit to kind of throw you off the scent were so stupid. At one point there's this crazy imagery and you're like, whoa, they're changing things up, and then it's literally just a dream. Boo! Stinky, stinky choices. Also, when I was watching it, I immediately posted pictures to Twitter comparing the makeup because the downgrade is so real. In the original, they actually made her look like she was healing from something. She's all puffy, the dressings actually look surgical. In the remake, she just has a fancy little ski mask on. It's so stupid. I can't believe it. If you've seen the original, really don't waste your time. I love Miss Naomi Watts too, but I want so much better for her. Speaking of horror queens, shall we talk about Pearl? I bet this was the one that you were waiting for, huh? Pearl is the prequel to X and follows Pearl as she tries to get out of her little farm town and make it as a star. There is a lot to like about this movie, don't get me wrong, but I do feel like it's completely wasted potential. I shit you not when I say this movie ends the second that it could become interesting. I liked it better than X. I think Mia Goth was amazing as Pearl. I think she did a much better job in this role than she did as Maxine, and what everyone is saying is true. If the Academy wasn't full of cowards, she could easily get a Best Actress nomination for this role. However, this movie has like no substance. It's a character study on Pearl, which I found really interesting, except that we don't learn anything new about her. It's a completely basic story, and I was very much understimulated. I mean, to be fair, it kept me entertained because the direction and the acting is amazing, but that's pretty much it. I walked into this movie knowing that Pearl was a killer who once thought herself a star, and this movie didn't give me anything beyond that. Pearl starts and ends the movie in pretty much the same place, which I find extraordinarily boring. They set the movie up in such an interesting way. I was adoring the first act, and the same thing happened with X, where the first act I was like, wow, this setup is amazing. I can't wait to see where this is going. And then it completely falls flat. And frankly, I need to get into spoilers here. I cannot like properly critique this movie and let you understand how I'm feeling without spoiling it. So go ahead and skip to this timestamp down below if you haven't seen the movie yet. So I love the setup of Pearl, where they're showing basically her first murdering spree that we can assume. Then her husband Howard comes home from the war to the mess that she's made, and then in that instant the movie ends. What the fuck? Seriously, Jesus, what the fuck?
Jesus, what the fuck?
That had me burning to know how they worked through that and ended up in the relationship that we see in X, where he's still extremely devoted to her and is even killing along with her after like 70 years, even knowing how batshit insane she is. Completely wasted potential, completely. All Pearl did in this movie was prove how crazy we already knew she was. What is that supposed to do for me? I wouldn't have this gripe if it wasn't so obviously a character study, because clearly they're trying to do some shit, they're trying to say some shit. If the movie didn't feel like it was playing it so smart, if the movie really presented itself more as just a fun time with this loony ass serial killer, then I'd be like, okay. But it really thought that it was doing more, and it's the same thing with X. Dare I say pretentious? I don't know. I don't like using that word, but I'm just not on board, and I wish I could be because everybody else loves these movies. I still recommend the movie though, and now that I know what it is, I feel like I would like it way more upon a second watch. It's the exact same with X, although I feel like with Pearl, it'll forever frustrate me because I'm always gonna be wanting more. I'd rather get a prequel about how Pearl and Howard mended their relationship and how he became crazy too, rather than another movie about Maxine, because like, I mean, how interesting could the commentary be about Howard coming back from the war and then just continuing to kill people? I've truly had enough of the 80s too, but whatever, I'm still gonna go see Maxine. Up next we have Don't Worry Darling. Again, I've done a full review for this movie, actually over 30 minutes long, so go crazy, go nuts. It brought up a lot of conversation about misogyny in the film industry, so it's a little bit of a heavier video, but I still think an important one. So moving on, Smile is the last movie on the docket for today. Smile follows Dr. Rose after a very traumatic incident with one of her patients in which she begins experiencing an unusual haunting. I wanted to like this movie so bad, especially because the marketing was so sick. I want more marketing like this, sending the actors to Major League Baseball games to creepily smile. It's cheap and it's effective, so what's the holdup, studios? Get me in your marketing departments, I'll fuck shit up in a good way. However, the movie was bad, so let's get into that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still happy that an original horror dominated the box office. It made a profit after literally its first weekend. But being that it's technically an original horror film, there's really almost nothing original about it. There is precisely one really unique and haunting image way towards the end of the movie, but for a good majority of the movie, I was like, oh, I'm watching It Follows. Someone on Letterboxd cleverly referred to this film as Shit Follows. There are also some painfully obvious homages to The Ring, where it's not so much homage as it is just kind of copying a bunch of stuff. Very much had some Final Destination vibes as well. It was like someone fed an AI a bunch of really good horror movies and Smile was what it shat out. Shat. I meant to say spat, but shat works too. But there are some things that are really good about it, and I feel like some people are going to be touting it as one of the best horror movie releases of the year, and here's why. It's a pretty stunning movie. It has this really great bleak atmosphere and a really consistent and strong aesthetic. The acting performances are pretty good. Our Scream King Kyle Gallner is there, and so he's great as always. I feel like he doesn't really get paid due for this filmography. And the jump scares were so good. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but I swear. I was actually scared of this movie, like hiding behind my fingers and shit, but I've recently learned this about myself. Jump scares are the only thing that still scare me because I am an anxious person. I'm mentally ill. The anticipation of jump scares lets you know when one is coming, so they're typically not effective for most people. But anxiety is anticipation. That's pretty much all that it is. It's the unknown and your brain firing at 1,000,000 miles per hour thinking of all the worst case possible scenarios. And jump scares really work for me because the buildup is so stressful. The top review on Letterboxd is someone even saying jump scare the movie, because it's true. It almost totally relies on jump scares for all the scary vibes, which is not a net positive. It makes the rewatchability pretty shit. It also has a really obvious and heavy-handed message about trauma, kind of giving us Hereditary Midsommar vibes. And it gets super messy, but I still think that a lot of people are gonna relate to it. So for all those reasons, I think that a lot of people are really gonna hype this movie up. When you're a seasoned horror fan and you see a movie that goes beyond homage and is pretty much just ripping stuff off, I think you're gonna be able to poke a lot of holes in it. I don't mind a good homage, I welcome it in fact. I was gushing over the homages in Do Revenge, but it was doing something fresh with old tropes. Smile is just doing old things over again. And then in the end, it gets really stupid. I talked about this in my first reaction on Patreon, where there are a lot of jokes in this movie, but no one in my audience really laughed at them. And then the parts that are supposed to actually be terrifying, me and my friends were laughing because they were so stupid. I wish I could explain, but it's a spoiler and you will know it when you see it. I think this movie is still worth seeing though, to be honest. It was still fun to see with friends, and I think that it is for sure gonna take off at middle school sleepovers. Gonna do numbers. Because my friends and I would have eaten this shit up at that age, holy hell. Smile can be this generation's bye-bye man, and I think that's beautiful. But that about wraps things up, there's not too much more to say. Typically, when big movies come out that I don't do solo reviews for, I do share a few more of my thoughts over on Patreon, so if you're interested, that'll be linked down below. Huge thank you to all of these current members. I would not be able to do this without them keeping me funded. It's only $5 a month for bonus content, so if you want to see my more thorough thoughts on Smile, that's on there. And there are also a bunch of other tiers if you feel like donating more. If not, all my social media can be found down below. Go crazy, have fun. I hope that you enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know what rituals you're performing this fine full moon, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!